My name is Olivia Nelson. I recently turned 30. Today, I want to share with you the story of the major turning point in my life. I have an older brother who is 2 years older than me. His name is Scott. From a young age, Scott was what you'd call a pretty boy. His facial features were well defined early on, and his handsome face was so talked about in the neighborhood that rumors spread about talent scouts from modeling agencies coming for him. He was what you might call a real heartthrob. He was likable, intelligent, and quick-witted, even as a child. Our parents, as well as the adults around us, all adored him. On the other hand, for some reason, I was the only one in our family who was a bit on the chubby side from kindergarten. Even though my facial features were similar to Scott's, being a bit chubby took away from my charm, and that's an understatement. I was shy, not very engaging, and I wasn't much of a talker, so I never got the chance to be praised as a smart kid like Scott. I noticed from an early age that people around us often contrasted us, labeling Scott and me as polar opposites. Our parents must have caught wind of this talk too. By the time I was in elementary school, it seems like my parents had lost interest in me. I didn't perform as well on school tests as Scott had at the same age, and I remained somewhat chubby. Scott was served an afternoon snack, but I wasn't. Despite this, I remained chubby. My mother used to laugh and say, "You really are as round as a ball." When I was a child, I didn't fully understand what she meant, and I just felt happy that she was laughing, but looking back, I realized that I was just the butt of her jokes. Scott would get new clothes and shoes for all sorts of reasons, his birthday, scoring a goal at his soccer club. Meanwhile, even though I was a girl, I got hand-me-downs from Scott, not just clothes, but shoes too. I can't remember how many times I tripped because the shoes didn't fit me. The only thing I treasured was the backpack that my grandparents gave me, just for me, before they passed away. After a while, Scott graduated from elementary school and moved on to a private middle school. My parents were overjoyed when he was accepted to a prestigious school known for its high academic standards. Around this time, Scott was so handsome that he was scouted to be a child model. Thanks to that, my parents, especially my mother, would often take Scott and purposefully walk down bustling streets like Fifth Avenue. She seemed to be saying, "Look how handsome my son is." On the other hand, I don't recall ever going out with my mother. Perhaps when I was a baby, but not after I grew up and became aware of things. Once, Scott suggested, "Next time, let's take Olivia with us too." I think he was aware, even as a child, that I was being neglected by our parents. But my mother just grimaced at Scott's words and replied, "Yes, someday." I didn't feel happy about Scott's considerate words. Rather, I felt miserable. A few years later, I also entered middle school. Unlike Scott, I went to a regular public middle school. To begin with, my parents never really expected much from me, so it seemed they had no intention of letting me take any exams. My dad even declared, "I can't afford to spend money on you." I didn't necessarily want to go to a private school, but being told such things from the start makes me feel like my life options are being limited. When I was little, I vaguely thought, is this how it is with sisters? I didn't know what other families were like. By the time I was born and aware, the abnormalities of this household were the norm. Around this time, I was going through puberty and started wondering, why am I the only one being treated differently? But the treatment I received from my parents only became stricter. Even though my mom was a housewife and should have had time, she often made me do the chores and go shopping while she went out to play with her friends. My dad too, when I said I wanted to go play with my friends, would accuse me. "What about the household chores?" My brother always cared about me, helped out, and even argued with our parents on my behalf, but they wouldn't listen to his opinions when it came to treating me. Eventually, my brother has a focus on high school entrance exams and then moved on to one of the top prep schools in the state, which meant he no longer had time to pay attention to me or our home. And that's when I truly started to understand what hell was like. The first incident was the no showing up in parent-teacher meeting. In other families, parents missing a parent-teacher meeting would be a big deal. But for my parents, it was more like, "We're not going, so what?" So it wasn't really considered an incident. During my 3 years of middle school, my parents only attended one meeting when I was in my first year. They didn't come during my second year or even during the crucial time of my third year when exams were around the corner. My homeroom teacher worried, "Is something happening at home?" But I brushed it off. I knew my situation wasn't normal, but it's not like my parents were physically abusive. I didn't know how to express the ongoing mental torment I was experiencing. It felt embarrassing to talk about it, as if I was confessing I'm a child not cherished by her own parents. The incidents continued. The New Year's Eve abandonment. At the end of that year, my parents took my brother to my mom's hometown and left me behind. Up until the previous year, I was included, but that year they said, "You're a student preparing for exams, so stay at home and study." I guess studying was just a pretext. They probably just found me annoying. So I ended up spending New Year's Eve all by myself. I didn't want to ask my friends to hang out on such a day because it felt like saying, I'm a lonely kid who was left behind, so I stayed home not meeting anyone. I held back my painful feelings, watched the Grammys alone, turned into the New Year's Eve specials, and went to bed after shedding a few tears. It happened the next morning. Ding dong, ding dong! The doorbell rang incessantly, and I jumped out of bed. It was too early for my family to be back. I nervously checked who was on the doorbell camera. There stood my uncle and aunt from my mom's side. Shocked, I rushed to the door with my bed hair and asked, "What's happening?"
"Olivia, leave this house. We've already discussed this with your mom. Don't worry, we'll take care of all the formalities,"
my uncle stated abruptly. Wait, what do you mean? I stammered, thrown off by his demeanor. I couldn't comprehend what he meant by leaving the house. "Olivia, if you don't mind, we want you to become our daughter. We don't have any children of our own, but ever since you were born, we've always thought of you as our daughter," my aunt said softly, tears welling in her eyes. I couldn't see the bigger picture then. Indeed, my aunt and uncle, who couldn't have children due to an illness, always doted on me whenever they visited. They loved me so much that I knew they had often criticized my parents' treatment towards me. They were the ones who spent time with me, the one left alone while my parents focused on my older brother. My aunt played with me, and my uncle bought me the latest treats and cute clothes. The memories I have with my aunts and uncle far outnumber those of my parents. My uncle, who had just been with my parents, started a conversation like this.
"Your parents, they don't plan on letting you go to high school. They said when you turn 16, they want you to work to help fund Scott's college education. We can't turn a blind eye to this. Olivia, you have the right to go to school and you don't need to work yourself to the bone for the family."
I was stunned. I had no idea my parents planned to rob me of my future for the sake of my brother. It made sense then why they hadn't attended parent-teacher meetings for the past few years. They didn't have an interest in me or my dreams and aspirations. They expected me to work like a mule. My aunt and uncle knelt down and comforted me as I crumbled on the spot. "We may not be your real parents and you might feel awkward, but we will make sure you're happy," they said. Tears welled up in my aunt's eyes as she hugged me tightly, overcome with emotion.
"Olivia, you have the right to be happy. We should have come for you sooner. If you're okay with it, we want you to become our daughter,"
my uncle added, his eyes reddening, looking straight at me. I wondered if I had ever been desired by adults in this way before. I was only just over 10 years old, but I knew what I had to choose. I decided to become their adopted daughter. Fast forward 10 years. Since they took me in, my aunt and uncle have showered me with immense love and had given me countless joyful experiences. My aunt enjoyed picking out clothes for me and would take me shopping on holidays, and my uncle, who said he always wanted to drink with his daughter, had a bottle of wine from the year I was born ready for my 21st birthday. We went on trips together, and my uncle, surprisingly childlike, would take me to zoos and aquariums even when I was in high school. Those are unforgettable and irreplaceable memories that I never had with my biological parents. At first, I called them aunt and uncle, but gradually I began to see them as my parents. Now, I call them mom and dad. I heard from them that when my parents visited, they drunkenly said to my aunts and uncle, "Olivia's just hopeless. She's not cute and her looks are a bit, well, lackluster. She's not smart either. Honestly, we don't need a stupid daughter. We have our excellent eldest son, Scott." My aunt and uncle were furious at these words, and when my parents started saying they wouldn't let me go to high school, the topic of adoption came up. I'm forever grateful to my aunt who wasn't drinking that New Year's Eve and drove all the way to me in the middle of the night. I want to repay my wonderful parents for all they've done. I wanted to become a daughter who my foster parents would be glad to have adopted. With this in mind, I studied relentlessly after entering high school. Truth be told, a lot was going on during my high school entrance exams and I couldn't fully focus. Therefore, after starting high school, I decided to strive for a future that wouldn't embarrass my aunt and uncle and set that as my goal. My hard work paid off and I was able to enter a renowned public university. However, that was not enough to show my gratitude to my aunt and uncle. No, my dear parents. I want them to have an easy life in the future. With this in mind, I continued to study hard after entering college, obtained a weather forecaster license during my student years, and now I'm appearing on television as a weather forecaster. In addition, I wanted to make my aunts and uncle proud, so I worked hard on dieting and exercising, and now I have earned the nickname Beautiful Weather Forecaster. Looking back, I always resembled my brother in looks, so I had the potential to become a beauty too. My aunt and uncle always said that they were proud of me, but I feel that with this, I have become a daughter they can be genuinely proud of. I have so many things to repay and gratitude to express. I won't hold back my efforts. Just when I was thinking that, my biological parents suddenly appeared before me. "Olivia, oh, you've grown so much. You've become such a fine young lady." My parents, tears welling up in their eyes, clung to me. I was just about to leave the TV station and get into my car when this happened, and I was unable to catch up with the situation. Honestly, I had not seen them for so long that I did not recognize them at first.
We were shocked to see you on TV. Scott said it was Olivia. We never expected you to become such a beautiful woman. And a weather forecaster too? That's incredible.
My father, as if to say, just as expected of my daughter, patted me on the shoulder. Really, just as expected of our daughter, we are so proud. They really said it. I couldn't hide the look of disgust on my face and glared at my parents. But my parents continued the conversation without showing any sign of concern. Oh, that's right. Since we've met, why don't we have a meal at the fancy restaurant just ahead?
You must be earning a lot as a weather forecaster, right?
What is their intention after lying and waiting for me like stalkers? And after suggesting a meal at a fancy restaurant, they asked if I earn a lot. Don't they just look like they're trying to freeload off me? They won't be able to parasite off me. I have to drive them away so they won't want to see me again. As I thought this, a plan popped into my head.
Oh, this could work.
Mom, Dad, it's nice to see you, but I have another job today so I can't go out to eat. Sorry.
Of course I didn't have another job.
I do have a plan to give my beloved aunt and uncle a meal at a fancy restaurant as a wedding anniversary gift. Oh, that's too bad. I didn't miss my mother's slight clicking of her tongue. Could you maybe share your contact information? I'm organizing a small party for my birthday soon, and I'm inviting people from the TV station. There will be plenty of delicious food, and it'll be fancy, so I'd love to invite you too. Upon hearing this, my parents' eyes noticeably lit up.
Really? Oh, aren't we lucky? So actors will be coming as well?
Oh, Dad, of course they'll be there. My parents were visibly excited, their smiles widening. Little did they know, no actors would be present. It was a small gathering, mainly a weather reporter's party. The main guests were people from the newspaper and TV station staff. At best, the most glamorous attendees would be the announcers and some TV personalities. Meeting my parents' expectant eyes, I simply smiled and said, "See you at the party," then left. A month later, as planned, I booked a venue and my birthday party took place. Despite being small, a good number of people gathered because, well, we rented a party venue. My parents arrived, arms waving, calling out, "Olivia!" They acted as if they wanted everyone to know they were my parents. It really gets on my nerves. Dad, Mom, welcome. Could you head to the dressing room right away? They'll help you with everything from your clothes to makeup. The clothes you're wearing are lovely, but they also have rental designer clothes. Enjoy the atmosphere while you're here. At my suggestion, my parents beamed widely. They were so easy to read. They can't hide their joy. Oh my, designer clothes. I hardly ever get the chance to wear them. I wonder if they'll suit me.
Haha, Mom, you put on a bit of weight.
Oh, stop it, Dad. While they were having this exchange, I flattered them. You both still look young and beautiful, so anything will suit you. It seemed as if they'd been waiting for that compliment, and they both nodded in agreement. When I was a child, I was scared of being disliked any more than I already was. I couldn't see my parents clearly, and I couldn't understand what they were thinking. But looking at them now, they seemed quite simple. High-quality things, power, beautiful things. They're the type of people who wag their tails at things everyone likes. My parents, having had their hair and makeup done, were in high spirits as they returned to the party venue. My mother was in a pale pink mini dress that revealed her shoulders, something a young woman would wear. Her appearance was ridiculously inappropriate for her age. The sagging skin on her knees gave away her age. My father chose a bright red suit with a flashy tie decorated with yellow and green geometric patterns. He was the only one in the venue dressed in such a flashy suit. Even if there was no dress code, no one would choose such a poor combination. The clothes were indeed designer labels, but they were secondhand. I had actually prepared all of it. I want my parents to wear these today. These clothes remind me of a family party we attended when I was young. When I said that, neither the makeup artist nor the costume staff questioned it. Of course, I have no memories of attending a party with these parents. A lie is a convenient thing. My parents, who believe without a doubt in designer labels, seemed more than happy as long as I repeatedly said it suited them. In the past old days, my parents would listen to anything my outstanding brother said as long as it wasn't about me. Now they are on the receiving end of such remarks, with the outstanding label now on me. After a while, the party started, and as today's star, it was my turn to give a speech. Before I went up on stage, I told my parents, "I have a message for both of you in my speech today, so make sure to listen carefully," and I held their hands. They looked at me with surprise and said, "What?" But they kept looking at me happily, even after I had gone up on stage. Thank you all for coming to my birthday party today. I would also like to thank everyone who helped organize this party," I began. At my words, my friends teased me, shouting, "You're so formal," and "You're not usually like this, are you?" Hearing this, I jokingly responded, "I'm just being myself," and turned towards my parents. "My parents are here today, right over there," I said, pointing in their direction. The lighting staff took the cue and spotlighted my parents. Those are my brazen parents who had the audacity to appear on TV and even set an ambush for me, despite having abandoned me in my teenage years. A murmur rippled through the crowd at my statement. It was not surprising, as I had rarely discussed my past with anyone other than close friends. "What? Olivia, how could you say such a thing?" My mother jumped up while my father was left in stunned silence. Since I was about the age when I started kindergarten, those two constantly compared me to my high-performing older brother, Scott, and always favored him over me. I was the one who never got treats, had to wear Scott's hand-me-down clothes. Until I was in grade school, I still loved my parents despite all that. For a child, parents are everything. But during middle school, they started to impose household chores on me and finally declared they wouldn't let me go to high school. They wouldn't even attend parent-teacher conferences. That's when my caring uncle and aunt decided to adopt me. Saying this about myself feels odd, but usually I am quite cheerful. That's because my uncle and aunt have repeatedly told me with love that I am not a bad child. They allowed me to gain confidence and overcome my shyness, turning me into the positive person I am today. Therefore, it seemed my normally cheerful demeanor and my harsh background were a shocking contrast for the audience. There were immediate murmurs of the worst and how could they appear on their daughter's birthday dressed like that? The crowd started to criticize my parents. Unable to withstand the surrounding gaze, my parents hung their heads and trembled. But now, I am grateful to those two. It's because of them that I was able to find my real parents, my uncle and aunt, who showered me with the warmth of a family. At these words, my parents stared at me as if expecting some twist where they would be acknowledged as important parents as well. I merely responded with a quiet, smiling gaze. "Mr. Treasure from the Daily Info, are you here? Please make this story and these pictures into an article. Consider it a birthday present for me." As I called out to a friend from the magazine from the stage, he had already started capturing pictures of my parents. Hey, stop it! Stop it! Don't take pictures!" My parents frantically tried to hide their faces. Shameless till the very end, I shouted at them. "You always made me do things I didn't want to do, even when I begged you to stop. You can't just force others and not expect to be forced yourself." At my reprimand, my mother's eyes welled up with tears. "I'm sorry. If you make this into an article, it will also harm your mother and father. You wouldn't want that, would you, Olivia?" I was flabbergasted by her audacity. "Do you really think I still consider you two as my parents? You barely raised me. You completely abandoned your duties as parents. My real parents are my uncle and aunt. They are the only ones I consider as my mother and father. Don't ever interfere in my life again." Before I knew it, recalling all that happened, my gratitude towards my uncle and aunt, tears began to stream down my face. The attendees, seeing my state, forcefully escorted my parents out of the venue. It's over, this time for real. I have finally severed all ties with those people. As a child, I cut them off to find shelter with my uncle and aunt. But now I have truly distanced them from me, all by myself. Feeling accomplished and grateful to my uncle and aunt, I shed a few more tears for the growth I have achieved. But right now, I feel incredibly refreshed. After that, the magazine editor asked me, "Are you really okay with this?" I responded, "Yes, please proceed," and they ended up writing an article about my upbringing. The story was quite sensational. It was picked up by many TV shows. There were worries about my image taking a hit, but in reality, the narrative became a drama of a corner girl making a dramatic turnaround, a close look at a modern Cinderella. I received mostly favorable press, and the whole thing boosted my reputation instead of hurting it. On the other hand, those two, I know it might be confusing, so let's reluctantly call them parents. After my story was published, they were given the cold shoulder by our neighbors, leading to their decision to move houses. The gossip spread quickly at my father's workplace, and he was pushed to resign. My mother, who had always been a homemaker, was now unemployed as well. My brother Scott informs me that they were getting by on their savings. Yes, even after I was adopted, Scott remained concerned for me and would visit me at my new home with my aunt and uncle. Initially, he had expressed a desire for us to live together again, but soon acknowledged that it was a better decision for me to stay with my adoptive family. He was happy for me, confident that I had made the right choice. He was always there for me, even during my college years, guiding me in my studies. My precious older brother Scott. Upon learning that I had revealed everything to the magazine, Scott decided to sever all ties with our biological parents. He would often joke, "The next time I'll see them is probably at their funeral," but knowing Scott, he probably wouldn't even attend that. 5 years had passed since then. I ended up marrying Mr. Treasure, who was working at the magazine that published my story. We now have children, and I'm a mother of a pair of twins, a boy and a girl. As a mother, I want to make sure my children are treated equally and can grow up in a happy and carefree environment, just like the selfless love that was shown to me by my aunt and uncle. And also, like my brother Scott, who has always watched over me, even from a distance. I want them to grow up to be kind and gentle to everyone they meet. But I still have other things I need to do besides raising my kids. Yes, that's to repay the kindness of my aunt and uncle. This year, for our wedding anniversary, I surprised them with a trip to Oregon, which we enjoyed together with my husband and children. My aunt and uncle would often tell me, "Olivia, you have your own family now, you don't need to do this." But this act of giving back is also a source of joy for me. It's not out of obligation, but rather because I want to see their happy faces. It's something that gives my life meaning. I jokingly tell them, "Don't take away my pleasure," as I start planning for our next surprise. Maybe a luxurious hotel stay for the entire family would be nice next time. There are still so many things we want to do as a family.
Why aren't you eating dinner? My father-in-law asked, who we were seeing for the first time in a long time for New Year's. He must have noticed that there was only enough food at the dining room table for 3. It happens all the time. What? My father-in-law looked curiously across the table at my mother-in-law and husband. What exactly do you mean by it happens all the time? A daughter-in-law who can't give her mother-in-law grandchildren would have to be a slave, wouldn't she? While chewing on the hamburger steak I had made, my mother-in-law responded as if it were second nature. That's right, Ruby is our slave. She stays in the kitchen to take care of us while we eat. My husband sipped his beer loudly and said this in the same tone as his mother, as expected. He took me to his mother's every weekend to help her with housework. Even though you couldn't give her grandchildren, I'm letting you stay here. You should appreciate her and do the best you can for my mom. I didn't want to go to my in-laws' house, but I had made a commitment. Even if I refused to go, my husband would verbally force me. He knows I have a short temper and difficulty finding my words. Mom, I brought a slave. He even greeted me that way recently. What are you talking about? My father-in-law seemed offended by the way my mother-in-law and husband referred to me as a slave. That's a normal family with children. Ruby's infertility took the possibility of grandchildren away from me. Ruby, it's not your fault. You should stop bullying her. What do you mean? You're the one that lives so far away, so stay out of the problem. That's right, Dad. Don't tell me what to do. You didn't have to watch Mom lose the possibility of having grandchildren. In rebuttal, my mother-in-law and my husband sounded like they were mocking my father-in-law. I tossed the coffee beans in the grinder while listening to their conversation. My mother-in-law and husband always ordered me to bring them coffee as soon as they finished eating. I was so busy with shopping for my mother-in-law that I only had time to eat a piece of sweetbread earlier. Come on, I'm hungry too. I'm not sure what I'm doing. As if escaping from the grinder's blade, a single coffee bean fell to the floor. My name is Ruby, and I'm a 37-year-old housewife. During the weekday lunch hours, I work part-time in the kitchen of a family restaurant. My husband and I rent an apartment. I used to work at the same local bank as my husband, but I left 3 years ago. I quit to focus on fertility treatment. We were unable to have children, so we sought medical attention and were told that the problem was on my side. After a year of treatment, I was told that it is impossible for me to get pregnant. My mother-in-law and husband changed shortly after that. Originally, we were both working and managing our own income and budgets. When I quit my job, my husband was responsible for my living expenses. He took over our savings and the bills for rent and insurance, and he started giving me money for living expenses. At first, we were able to live comfortably on $1,000 a month. However, since we don't have fertility treatments anymore, you can save money. These were the first words out of my husband's mouth when we decided to give up on trying to conceive. What? Because of the financial burden of the treatment, I've been giving you more money for living expenses, but you don't need it anymore. You can go back to work if you want." True to his word, he cut back and gave me $800, then $600, even $500 a month. Of course, there was a time when I was desperately trying to find work. My mother-in-law, of all people, got in the way of that. "Working as a full-time employee is not good for a wife. She will tell you that if you don't share the housework, she will divorce you." "So you're saying I shouldn't work?" "Of course, if it's only part-time, then fine. You need to devote yourself to Carl and serve me. You can't even have grandchildren, so it's the least you can do." Is it really so bad that I can't have children? Despite going through painful treatments, I was unable to have a child. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, changed her mind about me. "My bathroom is filthy, so please come and clean it. Drive me because I'm going out to dinner with a friend." She frequently called and asked me to run errands. To top it all off, I worked every weekend at my in-laws' house. Plus, no matter what I did, all she did was complain. "Why are you folding laundry like that? Why not put the corners together and fold it correctly and neatly? Do it again." My mother-in-law once threw the folded laundry onto the floor. She seemed to enjoy hurting me. "I'm going out for a drink. Do you want to join me?" my father-in-law asked after dinner. "If you don't want to, you don't need to. I was just thinking about what happened during dinner. You've been treated so badly by Elizabeth and Carl." His words pulled on my heart. I automatically started to cry. "I saw that, and if you want, you can vent to me." My father-in-law took me to a local bar. It was small, but clean and cozy. We sat at a table across from each other. He ordered a beer, and I ordered a whiskey soda. We ordered mixed nuts and a salad. "At the dinner table, I could tell Elizabeth and Carl were being rude to you." My father-in-law began to speak after taking a sip of beer. "I've been treated badly since I gave up fertility treatment." My father-in-law listened to me tell him about how his wife and son have treated me. "I'm blamed for not being able to have children and am forced to run errands. I told him my husband wouldn't let me work full-time. He's reduced my living expenses after stopping fertility treatments, and now he only gives me $500 a month. What I hate most is being called a slave. Elizabeth is not happy unless she gets her way." "Yeah, I know." "She wasn't like this before, but she became selfish after having Carl. She would yell at me so much that I began to dislike her, and now we pretend to be a happy couple." "Do you think it's because he doesn't want to be with me?" "I'm jealous my father-in-law has a place to escape to." "You're not tough enough to make yourself heard." "Yeah, but venting to you makes me feel better." "Good, that makes me happy." Before leaving the restaurant, my father-in-law and I had one more beer and one more whiskey soda. However, a situation came up right after that. "I'm back." My mother-in-law and husband were standing there when I opened the door. "Dad, did you have a night out with my wife?" My husband says this while looking at both of us. "What? I just invited Ruby for a drink." "What kind of relationship is this that you can go out for drinks together?" My mother-in-law looked mad. "What kind of? Just like your husband said." "What are you thinking, Ruby? Isn't it wrong for a wife to go to a bar with a man?" "You can't give me grandchildren, but you still have desires." My husband and mother-in-law both pointed at me. "Enough!" A powerful voice echoed throughout the area as if thunder had struck. My father-in-law was enraged, staring at Carl and Elizabeth. He blew up. "What is it with you? Desire? All I wanted was for Ruby to relax." The rage sped up my heart rate. Mild-mannered people can become more difficult to deal with when angered. "Elizabeth." When she heard her name called, my mother-in-law shuddered. She must be scared of him. Or maybe she had something to hide. "You said, what kind of relationship do you have with your father-in-law, that you go out drinking together?" "That's, my daughter-in-law is treated like a slave, and I took her to get her mind off it. That's what happened." "Because of Ruby, I can't have grandchildren." "How can you say that when you hate children?" "What?" Those words made me want to yell. My mother-in-law always blamed me for not giving her grandkids. Well, grandchildren are different than other children, aren't they? That said, I don't think you wanted grandchildren enough to treat Ruby like this. You're just making an excuse to point the finger at her. My mother-in-law looked like she was about to say something to my father-in-law, but quickly averted her gaze. Did she have nothing to say back? Or was she afraid of her husband? Carl. Wait, what? I heard you only give Ruby $500 a month for living expenses. Do you keep the rest of your salary? No, I pay rent and insurance. Even so, I don't think that's all of your salary. My husband turned his head and bit his lower lip. He couldn't think of a quick excuse. I came here to discuss our future. Let's get right to it. My father-in-law led us to the living room. What do you mean, discuss our future? Just sit down. Make some coffee first, Ruby. Don't tell her what to do. My father-in-law yelled, and my mother-in-law shuddered again. Make coffee for us, and a cup for Ruby, too. My mother-in-law nodded and sat meekly in her chair. My husband took a seat beside her. I sat on a chair further away from the table. I'll be retired in a few years. After my current assignment ends, I won't be living with you anymore. My father-in-law, still standing, started to speak. What? What exactly do you mean? Elizabeth and Carl's voices overlapped. Mr. Murphy looked at both of them. We've been masquerading as a couple for years, so we no longer need to live together. I'll live where I want, and you can stay here. That's fine, but I changed my mind after you accused me of being unfaithful earlier. I'm selling the house. Elizabeth, I'll leave you. No, where am I gonna live? My mother-in-law, as expected, was surprised and stood up. Why don't you just get a place to live? How am I gonna do that? I can't pay the rent. Get Carl to help you. He only gives her $500 a month. I'm sure he can pay for you. That's not possible. When asked to handle things financially, Carl stood up and waved his hands. He must have been nervous because he was wobbling. We don't have any money. If I do that, I won't be able to pay Mom's debt. Elizabeth gasped. My husband swallowed his words. But I for sure heard that Elizabeth has debt. Was she in debt? You just mentioned debt, didn't you? My father-in-law exclaimed, even more horrified. Elizabeth and Carl, what exactly do you mean by debt? Explain. I didn't mean what I said. I said explain. My mother-in-law burst into tears when she heard her husband's angry voice. But his rage didn't fade. Mom owes me $50,000. I'm her co-signer. With a resigned expression on his face, my husband began to speak. Around the time we stopped fertility treatment, Mom made an investment. She made some money at first, but the stock market crashed. You mean you lost money in the stock market and went into debt? I used family funds. At the time, we were put onto stocks that would go up, but eventually we got into debt. But now I'm paying it with my salary, and Mama's repaying it by working part-time at a supermarket. This was news to me. I had never heard anything about any stocks or debt. My mother-in-law had lost a lot of money in the stock market and had borrowed money to make up for it when I stopped fertility treatment. She must have tried to pay back the debt by buying stocks that were supposed to go up. But as they were both repaying debt, that stock didn't go up either. Maybe, I couldn't help but say the first thing that popped into my mind. That's also when you and Carl began treating me like a slave. Ruby, what are you trying to say? Were you just taking it out on me? The slave treatment started around the time I stopped fertility treatments. I doubt that it's because she wanted a grandchild so badly, but the simple answer is that she was taking it out on me because that was satisfying. My mother-in-law stayed silent as expected. And Carl used the money that he took out of my monthly expenses to pay off his debts. He can save money because there's no fertility treatment. He didn't give me less money for some strange unknown reason. He just needed the money to repay his mom's debt. You stupid idiot! Finally, my father-in-law blew up. Even if it's family money, it's money I worked for and saved. You put it in stocks without consulting me. To top it all off, you lost it. What the hell kind of money are you spending? After saying this, my father-in-law suddenly left the room as if he had thought of something. He looked like he was going to the second floor. We all followed him, What are you doing, Dad? Show me Elizabeth's stuff. I'll check what she's buying. Stop! She cried and screamed, but her husband didn't care. Stop it! Her husband opened the closet door as she yelled. The first thing that caught my eye was a luxury handbag. With just a quick glance, you could see at least 10 of them. Ruby, are these bags expensive? They're all luxury items, costing over $1,000. My father-in-law opened a small drawer in the corner of the closet. There was an array of accessories, rings, necklaces, and earrings. Some of them had diamonds, rubies, and other precious stones on them. I picked up the ring and looked at the inside. I found an engraving of K18, indicating it was made of 18-karat gold. Elizabeth, you bought all these expensive things without telling me? I'm sorry, but... Divorce! My father-in-law turned his eyes on my husband in disgust and he snapped. All this spending, investing in stocks without my permission, and treating Ruby like a slave? Divorce! I want a divorce. I won't take no for an answer. Then how am I supposed to live? Talk to Carl. I'll sell this house and land immediately. You can sell these bags and jewelry to pay for the move. My mother-in-law couldn't say anything back. My husband was nodding his head and biting his lip. He no longer had the arrogant and domineering demeanor that he had when he treated me like a slave, like it was a lie. The next day, my father-in-law got 2 sets of divorce papers. Here, Ruby, if you want to file for divorce too, my father-in-law said as he handed one to me. I looked at my husband, and he sighed and looked away from me. Of course I want a divorce, but more importantly, we want alimony from these people. I thought hard about this all night last night. How have I been suffering for so long? What do I want to do now? I really wanted to have a child. The fertility treatment was agonizing, but I endured it. But then I realized that I couldn't conceive. I continued my story, holding back the tears in my eyes. All the painful tests and treatments I went through to become a mother were all for nothing. I can't have a baby no matter how I try. As I was grieving, Carl told me that since I didn't need fertility treatment, he would reduce my living expenses. What? Are you saying this is all Carl's fault? Shut up, Elizabeth. My father-in-law was horrified, and my mother-in-law immediately stopped talking. My mother-in-law blamed me for not giving her a grandchild, and then she treated me like a slave. Do you know how hard it was for me? Naturally, there was no way Elizabeth or Carl would respond. But in the end, Carl just needed money to pay off his debts. For Elizabeth, it was just an outlet for the stress of losing so much money in the stock market. I want you to reimburse me for this. What if I say I won't pay? Sure, I'll talk to my lawyer. My husband put his palm to his forehead and fell silent. After the new year, my father-in-law officially divorced my mother-in-law. When he put his house on the market, he found a buyer within a few days. Someone was just looking for land to build a house in that area. So they decided to tear down the old house and clear the land before selling it. Having no place to stay, my mother-in-law moved into a rundown apartment that looked like it would cave in from a gentle breeze. She now lives with my ex-husband. In addition to their living costs, they have to pay off their debt and alimony to me, which I'm sure is very difficult for them financially. My mother-in-law is working at a supermarket during the day and a part-time job at a pub at night. My husband also works a second job on the weekends at a wedding hall in addition to his company job. They complain to everyone around them that it's hard to pay their debt and alimony while watching others become happy. Meanwhile, I moved into a beautiful little apartment and got a job through my father-in-law. It was a clerical job at a security company. He said I could use my knowledge of accounting and my skills from working at a bank. I want you to be happy. If you ever need help, just tell me anything. My father-in-law is on my side, and I will do my best in this new chapter to reassure him. And this time, I will shine on my own. The morning of my first day at work, I put on a new suit and made a promise to myself.